Imagine waking up 30,000 years ago, opening your eyes to the freezing morning air, and realizing you are completely alone. The fire has completely burned out, leaving nothing but cold, gray ash. The camp around you is entirely empty. The silence of the ancient forest is deafening, and there are no footprints left behind for you to follow. Take a close look around your environment. You have no tribe. You have no relatives. There is absolutely no one left to protect you in the dark, and no one is coming back to help you. For a modern human, being left alone is just an uncomfortable feeling of loneliness. But for an early human, being completely isolated in the prehistoric wilderness meant only one thing. It was an absolute, undeniable death sentence. To fully grasp this terrifying reality, we need to completely redefine what family actually meant in the ancient world. For the first humans who walked this earth, family was not just about love, affection, or emotional support. Family was literally the only technology they had to survive a violently hostile world. Family meant shared food when you were too sick, exhausted, or injured to hunt. Family meant a physical wall of wooden spears protecting you from massive apex predators while you slept. Family meant accumulated life-saving knowledge, knowing exactly which wild plants would heal a festering infection, and which ones would violently poison you. You simply could not outrun a prehistoric predator alone. You could not survive a brutal, flesh-freezing winter alone. You could not bring down massive, dangerous prey alone. Every single evolutionary instinct programmed into the ancient human brain screamed one clear biological message: isolation is fatal. Human beings evolved to stay deeply, permanently connected to their bloodlines. The prehistoric tribe was a single living organism, and you were just one small, vulnerable cell inside of it. If you were separated from the main body, you would die rapidly and painfully. But as archaeologists dig deeper into human history, they keep finding evidence of something deeply disturbing, something that completely contradicts this fundamental biological law of survival. They find ancient remains and historical evidence showing that not every tribe stayed together. Not every family fiercely protected its own. In fact, humans have a long, dark history of intentionally breaking these vital, life-saving bonds. Think about the terrifying logic of this. If family was so absolutely important, and if being alone meant certain agonizing death, why would some ancient humans deliberately choose to break those bonds? Why would they willingly walk away from their own blood, or actively choose to leave their own members behind in the freezing dark? The answer is not a simple story of prehistoric cruelty or random violence. The answer reveals one of the most uncomfortable, terrifying truths about human survival. To truly understand how deep this dark instinct goes, we have to look at exactly what happens when the human brain is pushed beyond its absolute physical and psychological limits. Imagine the brutal, suffocating reality of an ancient winter that simply refuses to end. The rivers are frozen solid beneath your feet. The animals you desperately hunt have completely migrated or died out from the extreme cold. The very limited food your tribe carefully stored is completely gone. Every single member of your family is slowly, agonizingly starving to death. The freezing winds are violently tearing through your fragile shelter, and the blinding pain of hunger is aggressively overriding every logical, compassionate thought in your head. This is the terrifying threshold where basic survival fundamentally clashes with human affection. When life-saving resources run completely dry, the primitive brain is forced to make mathematically impossible decisions. Who exactly gets the very last piece of meat? Who receives the warmth and protection of the dying fire? And the most horrifying question of all, who gets intentionally left behind in the freezing snow so the rest of the bloodline can survive? When pushed into the absolute abyss of prehistoric starvation and extreme scarcity, the human mind does not always choose love. It actively chooses continuation. It chooses survival at any cost. Anthropologists and archaeologists have uncovered deeply unsettling evidence of this exact behavioral phenomenon all across the ancient world. They have found prehistoric burial sites and abruptly abandoned settlements that tell a very dark, uncomfortable story. In times of severe environmental collapse, desperate extreme migrations, or brutal unending famine, human tribes regularly practiced strategic abandonment. They intentionally left the severely injured, the fragile elderly, and sometimes even the weakest members of their own family behind in the wilderness. They did not do this out of pure evil or psychopathic cruelty. They did it because the unforgiving, brutal mathematics of prehistoric survival demanded a heavy sacrifice. Carrying dead weight meant the entire bloodline would be permanently erased from history. The human brain essentially evolved an emergency override switch, a cold, calculating psychological mechanism that allows a desperate person to completely detach from their own flesh and blood, temporarily shut off their deep empathy, and walk away into the dark to save themselves. The family bond was sacred, but survival was the absolute, undeniable law of the prehistoric world. But survival wasn't the only reason humans broke family bonds. We have established that extreme environmental pressure forced ancient humans to abandon their own blood just to survive the physical world. But there is a much darker, much more complex side to human nature. The absolute greatest threat to an early human wasn't always a freezing winter or a starving apex predator. Sometimes the most dangerous, unpredictable enemy was sitting right next to them, warming their hands by the exact same campfire. While cooperation and deep social bonds absolutely built the foundation of human civilization, intense, violent competition shaped it just as much. The primitive human mind was not a peaceful, harmonious machine. It was a highly reactive, deeply flawed engine, driven by social status, jealousy, and the desperate biological need to reproduce and dominate the environment. When you put a group of highly intelligent, emotionally complex primates together in a confined space with strictly limited resources, severe conflict is completely inevitable. Not every family bond was broken simply because a tribe ran out of food during a harsh winter. Many prehistoric families were violently torn apart from the inside out by intense internal power struggles. Imagine the brutal, suffocating social dynamics of an ancient human tribe. You had fierce, unrelenting competition for the strongest, healthiest mates. You had violent, bloody disputes over who would lead the hunting party and control the daily distribution of precious food. You had deep, burning jealousy over social status, tribal influence, and respect within the group hierarchy. When these intense psychological pressures finally reached a boiling point, the results were catastrophic. Brothers fought brothers for ultimate control. Weaker members were deliberately cast out, exiled, or quietly murdered, simply because they dared to challenge the absolute authority of the tribal leader. Entire family factions actively split apart, permanently fracturing the main bloodline, and walking away in the middle of the dark night to start bitter, rival tribes. The human brain evolved to quickly understand that sometimes staying with your family was actually far more dangerous than facing the wild alone. Evolution didn't just reward the humans who knew how to share and cooperate. It also fiercely rewarded the humans who knew exactly when to betray, when to conquer, and when to permanently sever ties to secure their own absolute dominance. And traces of those ancient, ruthless behaviors may still exist today. Look around at the modern world we have built for ourselves today. We no longer spend our lives desperately fleeing from massive, bloodthirsty predators in the dark. We are not constantly forced to migrate across frozen, deadly continents just to survive a brutal ice age. We live in heavily fortified, climate-controlled homes. We safely buy our food in brightly lit supermarkets. And we have practically eliminated the violent, physical threats that haunted early humanity for thousands of generations. But take a much closer look at our daily lives, and you will quickly realize something deeply disturbing. We are still fighting the exact same battles. We just replaced the physical wilderness with a psychological one. The modern human brain is not a modern machine. It is an ancient, highly reactive survival engine that was painfully constructed over millions and millions of years of intense, inescapable social dependence. For your prehistoric ancestors, being accepted by the tribe meant absolute survival. And being rejected meant certain, agonizing death. There was no middle ground. That ancient biological wiring did not just disappear because we invented advanced technology, safe cities, and the internet. It is still the core operating system running violently inside your head right now. This is exactly why deep family conflicts feel so incredibly devastating today. When you experience harsh rejection from your own bloodline, Your modern brain doesn't just process it as a simple, uncomfortable emotional disappointment. It processes it as a literal, life-threatening danger. When you face cold abandonment from the very people who are biologically supposed to protect you, it instantly triggers the exact same primal, suffocating panic that an ancient human felt when they were left behind in the freezing snow. To your primitive nervous system, being excluded from your family feels exactly like a physical threat to your actual survival. It feels like death. We struggle so deeply with family relationships today because the biological stakes have always been impossibly high. Your biology is violently screaming at you to stay connected, to fiercely fix the broken bonds, and to never let go of your tribe. But at the exact same time, you carry the dark genetic memory of ancestors who learned that sometimes, brutally cutting those ties was the only possible way to stay alive. You are constantly torn between the ancient, desperate need to belong and the equally ancient instinct to aggressively protect yourself at all costs. We carry the heavy, unseen generational trauma of a prehistoric world where fierce loyalty kept you warm, but ruthless pragmatism kept you breathing. You don't need to be shivering around a dying campfire to feel the crushing weight of those ancient decisions. Every single time you set a difficult boundary, every time you forcefully walk away from a toxic relative, and every time you choose your own mental survival over your bloodline, you are echoing a choice that was made tens of thousands of years ago in the deep, unforgiving wilderness. Ancient humans learned the hard way that family could absolutely save your life in the darkest of times. But human history also clearly shows that under enough intense pressure, raw survival could sometimes tear those sacred bonds completely apart. The world changed. Human nature never changed completely.